Asking for some instruction on how to take a draped pattern from the stand and turn it into a paper pattern. So I did a little demonstration using just by taking pictures, but I think it needs some sort of verbal stuff going alongside it. So this is me recording that. So on the stand here, I've just draped something very relaxed. It's got a bit of a gather or a pleat here, and it's got a loop here. If you had something that was similar to this, then you would, this is just more the same. Bit of 3D movement, why not? Okay, so what you need to do is you need to go in and notch, well, I say notch, you need to mark on the pattern where your folds meet the fabric behind it, like I've done here. This will help you when you put it back together again, because it's not just the form of your garment isn't just dictated by the shape of the pattern pieces, it's how those pattern pieces are then folded and put back together. And you want to be able to have instructions so that if somebody made 10 of them, they could follow your instructions and they'd all be the same. So you can see here I've been putting on some markings. I've also marked this one here just with one notch so that I know that when I put this back together again, this piece has to join onto the piece behind it. The example that I was shown didn't have a sleeve in it yet. I know that pattern cutting can be like sort of relaxed and free form, but having some markings or having some recognizable pieces will really help you, like side seams, shoulder seams, and sleeves if you're going to have sleeves. So for this one, I added in a side seam and a sleeve head, an armhole. I've also done some pinning here at the top, so there's a gather at the shoulder seam as well. So if you're working on the stand, you've just got a big sheet of calico and you're draping it everywhere, do stop and think, right, okay, where's my centre front? Where's my side seam? Where's my shoulder seam? They don't have to be in traditional places, but have a think about where you want your seams to be, your panels to be, and start working this out then, because you will have to break up a giant piece of fabric. Well, saying that, you wouldn't necessarily have to, but it might be beneficial for you to do that. Okay, so that's me drawing on the shoulder line, and here I'm marking on these folds. So I'm drawing a line at the top part of the fold and then where it joins the fabric beneath it. Like this. And I'm just using like a marker pen, whatever pen, your first trials should be messy, and you really need to get as much information on there as possible when it's pattern cutting that's like this, where there's where it's quite different. It's further away from like the basic bodice block or like a standard suit jacket, because these will be instructions that will help you drape it again. It's not just the shape, it's instructions about where the drape will be. And when I say drape, I mean draping, because you could drape a very simple, minimalist pattern on the stand also, but I'm talking about these folds and these creases and these gathers. I went back in, and the notches, the marks that I put on, I did a crossbar against it so that I would just sort of improve the accuracy of knowing this meets that and that needs to cross over with that. And certain ones, you might not know which notches are supposed to match which notches when you unfold the whole thing, so you can put markings and label them. So here the A needs to match up with A. The other ones on the bust, I thought that I would remember that, but maybe I should have gone in and gone like B, C, D, E. Just like really, really mark everything. More information is better than lack of information, because once it's all folded out again, it won't look, well, you'll see it doesn't look like how it does on the stand, and trying to put it back together again is a bit like doing a jigsaw where everything is the same colour. So up here, where I drew on my shoulder seam, I've cut it, and that results in a zigzag edge, a bit like the edge that you'd see on a bust dart. So it doesn't just continue down with the normal seam, you end up with a zigzag because of how the fabric has been folded under a fold or under a dart. but I'll show you that. This is just me putting in more labelling. It's quite messy, but it'll help me, because when it comes off, it's not going to be necessarily recognisable. It's like a t-shirt that has a neckline, a side seam, an armhole. So any information just is helpful. I'm putting on front side seam. That's the side seam. And I always put on front and back because that can also be confusing. And here it is. I've taken it off of the stand. And these are all the markings once they've been spread out and the piece of fabric's no longer folded. Up here you can see where I've marked on those folds, and you can, it's not very obvious, but you can see where there's a up and down, a change in angle of the line of the shoulder, and that's where they get hidden into the darts and you end up with a straight line. Okay, so what I've done here is I've laid it out on pattern cutting paper and I've drawn around it very roughly. In my example to you, I have used a marker pen, but you would use a pencil and you would draw it very lightly, because this is not good. This is a line that's going to guide you, but this is not going to be your finished line. To get these marks onto the paper underneath, the ones that come to the edge, you can draw a line continuing from them, and then you can, once you've taken your fabric away, you can continue that into the pattern. With the marks that are on the fabric, that are sort of inside the fabric, you'll need to cut or slit or punch a hole or pierce a hole with a pencil, something so that you can draw through it. Here, and here. For a while I thought I could just draw through it with a pen, but it didn't work. You need to snip it. This is me snipping it. It's quite a handy way of doing it when you have that T shape. I'm also here filming myself, so it's quite bad, but I do sort it out a little bit in a minute so you can actually see what I'm doing. There you go. So I'm snipping through the cross part of the T, and then once that's been split, I can then slip the tip of the scissors in there and snip that. There you are. Then I can lay that back out on the paper, and I can draw the T through that, the T shape. That's a lovely close-up, and why not have another one, even more close-up. Okay, so after I've taken my fabric away, this is all the notches and markings and the outline transferred onto pattern paper. I then go around that and make the lines smooth and nice. I use my French curve, or I just use a ruler, but or you can even freehand it, but try and make the curves, try and even them out and make them regular. You would also, at this point, the pieces that are joining together, you have to make sure that they flow into each other. So if one is a right angle, the other one has to be a right angle. Aiming for a right angle just generally is a good start point, but it doesn't always have to be a right angle. Some of them, a front piece could have a wider angle going into a shallower angle. They just have to, the edge has to flow together. You can check that by putting your pattern pieces, butting them up beside each other. At the point, at the seam where they would be sewn together. I will do a little video of that at some point, probably next week. This is that sort of zigzaggy edge, so you need to make sure that you are copying that when you draw over it with your proper good line. Here I've transferred all of the notes and the labelling over onto this one. I've also drawn on where the grain line is. So on this one, a grain line usually goes from top to bottom, but if you're doing something drapey, you might want to do it on the bias. This one I've drawn the grain line on as it would be for a straight grain, like a normal setup, but really I think if it's going to be drapey, you should be on the bias. You get better folds. And then you draw your seam allowance around it. Well, I say you draw your seam allowance around it. Do all of your pattern pieces, then check that all the seams match each other, the pieces that are going to be sewn to each other, and then when you're happy that everything fits with each other and fits together, then draw your seam allowance on it, and then you'd cut this out, and this would be your paper pattern, and you'd lay this down on fabric, cut it out of fabric, and then sew it back together again, and you should end up with a fabric garment that is similar to your prototype, and if anything better than your prototype, because you have made it more regular and more smooth and finessed those kind of curves and shapes. Also, that means that you have a pattern piece that you can use to recreate that again. and you can adapt the pattern piece if you decide you want to have lots more fabric. You can apply the processes that we've talked about before for flat pattern cutting, where you want to split and spread, or you want to start paneling this up. You could cut this right down the middle and open it out, and you could have different fabric for one piece, different fabric for another piece. Yep. But that generally is how to take a something that you've draped fluidly, naturally on the stand that has maybe folds and gathers, how to take it from the stand to a pattern piece. Okay, I'm going to pop this up on Learn.